So hello and welcome back to the Web and Application Security event. We're following on our CISO discussion from this morning with a panel discussion, which we're having looking into the blind spot of third-party apps on websites. Before I introduce the panel who've just joined me, I'd just like to remind you that you can contact the session sponsor Reflectors by going to their company booth on the platform, where you can arrange a text, voice or video chat with the booth manager and take a look at the company promotional material, including videos and company brochure. So let me just give you a bit of background. COVID-19 is still here and so is cybercrime. This includes MageCart and web skimming incidents on e-commerce websites. Software supply chain exploits have also become common and all methods are trending up in 2021. These issues are largely caused by a lack of visibility into third-party web applications and remote domain ecosystems. Hackers are constantly exploiting security blind spots, undetected dependencies or zero-day vulnerabilities to bypass traditional application security solutions and harvest personal data illegally. So we're glad to be hosting three cybersecurity experts to talk about what these security blind spots are. You'll now get exclusive access to the latest trends, use cases, compliance issues, and more. So I think we're all here, so let's get started. Let me introduce you to each of the panel in turn, and maybe they can just tell you something about themselves as well to give a bit of background into their involvement. So I'd like to start by introducing Matan Ben Lulu, the founder of Breachpoint. Matan, welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you all. My name is Matan Ben Lulu. I'm the founder and CEO of Breachpoint, a cybersecurity company based in Israel, providing advanced advisory and consultancy services for high-profile organizations in Israel and abroad, specializing mainly in corporate security as well as for other aspects like cloud and online services security, with more than 10 years of experience throughout many sectors in Israel and abroad.
Okay, thank you very much, Matan. Next up, we have Tiennot van Dilst, who is the cybersecurity expert at Cert2Connect. Welcome aboard, Tiennot.
Good morning, and thank you very much. Well, I'm Tiennot van Dilst. I'm from the Netherlands, not Amsterdam, but more south. I work with Cert2Connect for 3 years now, and we are a company that is really specializing in automating security and helping our clients in creating more visibility in security and making sure that we deliver the solutions that the clients can keep up with the speed which is required in security right now. I'm working there for 3 years. Before that, I used to be a QSA for a company from Israel. I used to be head of delivery for that same company. Have been for a couple of years a corporate security officer in a hosting company from the Nordics. And I've been around in security for about 21 years now.
Okay, thank you, Tiennot. And last but by no means least, we have Idan Cohen, who is the co-founder and CEO of Reflectors. Idan, welcome.
Hey, thank you for everyone having us. I'm Idan, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Reflectors. Reflectors is a cybersecurity company fights to mitigate the risk created by third parties application on website, which I think we'll talk about a bit during this panel. I have more than a decade of experience in cybersecurity, started from the IDF as an intelligence officer and researcher, moved to manage one of the biggest offensive security companies in Israel, even founded another startup named Shynet, and I started Reflectors 5 years ago, and happy to be here.
Okay, thanks, Idan. So now you've met the panel, let's crack on with the questions which they're going to discuss. I'd like to come to you first, Matan. Maybe you could start off by explaining what third-party web applications are.
Well, basically, when we're talking about third-party applications and mainly components, we're talking about any component, code piece, add-on feature that is introduced and is or managed by a third party, and which is not developed by you, by the website owner. And it's a bit confusing because when we look on the major actors, for example, Google, Facebook, and other third-party vendors, this is something that we are used to trust. But most of the websites today can also integrate less known open source projects and other features that provide some functionality to the website. If we will divide it into two main sections, we can see the first party attacks, for example, which includes a threat actor that actually infiltrate into your backend infrastructure and manipulate your own code in order to perform malicious activities. And the second scenario is actually third-party attacks, which your third-party vendors that are integrated into a website actually attacked and used against you in order to affect your customers and perform other malicious activities, for example, intercepting personal data or payment data, or executing code on your customers on the client side. And almost all of the websites today are using some sort of third party code, which is actually pretty amazing that you can just pick off the shelf scripts and other components that will give you your desired functionality that you need. And on one side, and on the other side, it contains, as we can see, a lot of potential security risks that are happening on a daily basis.
Okay, thanks. We're going to get into the technical problems that they can create a bit later on. But maybe if I can come to you, Tiennot, and ask you from a compliance perspective, what challenges are these third-party web applications creating?
One of the first challenges, what I see for compliance and privacy officers, is that they really need to be aware about those third-party scripts and applications and what exactly they are doing. I mean, in my experience, not many of them are aware what exactly is going on. Keep imagining in your head that a third-party script is an application by itself, and it can use by itself also a third-party script. So that gets very fuzzy. Yes, security officers, most of them, which I know, and myself, and back in that days, I've looked at my web applications also, and we have tested for security issues and those kind of things. However, also me in the past was not aware of those parts of the application. Yes, I knew there were some scripts, but what exactly are they doing? Where does the data come from? And actually, it took me some time before I really realized that a lot of my web application is outside of my area of control. And I see many of my former colleagues having that same. And that's one of the biggest issues in compliance you can have, not being in control and not being aware of the risk. Secondly, if you take a look at the most well-known standards, they are not really clear about these applications. Yes, if you take the common standards like ISO 27001, PCI DSS, or even GDPR, they talk about supplier management, development, they talk about setting up connections to other domains even. However, when you really read it, and if you're not a techie, there's a big chance you won't think about the third-party applications inside your website. And what does it mean? Well, luckily nowadays there are solutions which can give you dashboards and which make it visible for you. And when you have it visible, then you know what's going on, and when you know what's going on, then you can take a look at the risk.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tiennot. You mentioned the solutions. So Idan, perhaps I can come to you to ask if those traditional Appstep solutions prevent that type of third-party attack. And why are the old solutions becoming ineffective in fighting the new threats?
Well, if you would look for a few years back, we always was focused about the attacks against our own servers, our own infrastructure, our own website. You buy the best WAF you have, and you have a very good application. You try to create yourself SDLC, security development lifecycle, to make your best product to get ready to production. And you put all your efforts from the compliance, from the development, from the code practice to make sure your own code is protected. And then you put added the WAF so you block any attacks on your code. But when we started with the third-party application, we changed the paradigm here. No more my own code, no more I'm in charge of the code. You now have websites that have around 80 or 70, 60 different third-party applications. Every one of them actually bypass the entire security lifecycle of the product. They are developed by someone else, maybe open source, maybe some other vendor. You never tested them. And even if you did have some kind of testing functionality about them, it contains all day long third-party code. So the traditional code is trying to, the traditional solution is trying to protect your code are still necessary. They're important to protect your website, they're important to protect your own application. But what about those 60 applications, 70 applications? They have the same level of permissions as your own code. They are running on your users. They have access to your data. So they have the same abilities as your own code, except for one thing. Almost no security controls about them. They can change on a daily basis. They can be hacked, like with groups like Medcard and stats that can change them, and then you have a huge incident inside your organization. And you actually, as Tiennot said, you're actually a bit blind to them. So even to ask the simple question, who are my third parties? Can you list me my third-party application list? It's very rare. Actually, when we are meeting with CISOs around the world and asking them, how many third parties do you have? They don't know. They probably heard about Google. They probably heard about Facebook. But then they discover 40, 50 different other applications that got entered by the marketing team or digital team, and they got scared. Whoa, we have a backdoor in our own website.
Yeah, so basically we're talking about lack of control, lack of security, and lack of awareness on this side, on the first party side, where third parties come in. With Tiennot and Matan, do you have any kind of comments or want to add anything to what Idan has mentioned about these threats and the lack of the fact that these old solutions are ineffective? I mean, have you anything to add on that?
Not?
Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, what can I add on that? Yeah, well, basically, like I said, that's one of the biggest things about, if you take a look at it from the compliance perspective, because compliance is all about awareness, all about what is there. When I give some awareness trainings towards management, I always say, if you take a look at security, information security is all about being unwillingly being at risk, going from there to willingly taking a risk. You always have to take risks, but enable to take a risk, you need to know what the risk is, and then you can make a conscious decision about it. And that's all about compliance. That's, in my opinion, all about security. There's no way you can close down everything because then you cannot do business anymore. You need to open doors, but you need to know what doors are opened and what is going out and what is coming in. And that is also what is important, well, not only for the compliance standards, but also for the law, because if you take a look at the different laws, at privacy laws, you need to know where the data, what you are requesting directly or indirectly, what is going on with it, where it's ending up, what is happening to it. And you can only do so if you know exactly what is going on. And that's one of the biggest risks, like Idan said, and like I said in the previous question also, if you are not aware of what is going on, you cannot take your steps, and you cannot secure, you cannot do anything about it. And basically you have a gap, you have an open door.
Okay, that's great, thanks. So let's say I understand the risks and challenges. How should you get started? What should the first move be?
Well, I think your first move should be that you know exactly what is going on. You need to know exactly, if you take a look at your website, you need to know exactly what third-party applications are in there. You need to know exactly what your own application is doing. Then you need to make an inventory. You need to make a baseline. This application needs to do that. That application needs to do that. But also, like I said in the previous question, those third-party applications, basically there's no control over it by yourself. If your third-party vendor decides to do something via those scripts, for instance, switch on a camera or do something, they can do it without you saying anything about it. But you do need to know about it. So you need to make a baseline and you need to monitor for that baseline. And at the moment that something changes, you want to be aware about it before your clients or your website visitors or the users of your applications are coming back to you and saying, hey, why is my data going somewhere else? Or if your client is saying, hey, why is am I getting now emails from this party which I did not allow? You need to know about that. That's, I think, your duty.
Also, if we will talk about managed third-party code, which is not which is not under your control in any way, and we also have a local example from Israel for an accessibility feature that I think is very common in terms of website, dozens or hundreds of thousands of websites. And it was centrally managed, and the company got breached, and the attackers utilized the fact that this add-on is centrally managed and deployed malicious code over, I think it was thousands of websites, in order to affect their customers. So in this case, even if you will do all of the great and important things that Tiennot said, you are still in a dynamic battlefield, and it can change in any point in time without you, well, being even notified about it. So we're talking about continuous monitoring and visibility of changes, and ability to identify any change or unauthorized change, or adding new features that you're unaware of, which is a really complicated mission, by the way.
Thank you, Matan. And staying with you, Matan, and given that situation, do you think CISOs are really prepared for the security and compliance challenges created by software supply chains? I mean, are they investing in this direction?
Well, the supply chain field is very broad and complicated. It's overwhelming by itself. For most of the organizations, if we're talking about cybersecurity-wise. The onboarding process for highly regulated organizations, I'm talking about monetary systems, government, etc., can be very lengthy and exhausting for both sides, by the way. Whether we're dealing with standard suppliers or other service providers, most of the organizations will rely on security questionnaires or other security evaluations, certifications, ISO, PCI, etc. Some will invest further and perform other security activities like penetration testing or vulnerability assessment. Well, when we're talking about the minor suppliers or orphan code pieces that are integrated into websites, in most of the cases they are overlooked. I don't think that any CISO that is taking any responsibility on its website will invest or currently investing the relevant efforts or thoughts about which code is used for some functionality in its website. And even if we will map the main activities for highly mature organizations, for example, secure development practices, open source library scanning for vulnerabilities, penetration testing, performing code review, vulnerability assessments, and even placing relevant security controls, for example, web application firewalls and other security controls that are very important, which are highly important for your overall web application security. Most of them will probably miss such threat. First of all, because it's not their main mission to find such a threat. And second, when we're talking about a dynamic battlefield, even if you performed in January a pen testing on your website and code review and everything went fine and you're aware of your risks and you have a mitigation plan, and a threat actor can manipulate or can exploit a non-vulnerability or other security vulnerability that is new in your website, and perform malicious activities like intercept or inject other malicious code, and you will not be aware of this until your next cycle of assessment or when you will find out in the news, probably. So I think that the main idea here is to create the relevant awareness that will push forward relevant practices and processes specifically for this subcategory of third-party security risks. It's a niche. It's a niche under the supply chain security risks that should be addressed and should get the relevant awareness among security officers and other stakeholders.
Yes, when we talk about investing in the challenge. We're talking about not just financial investing, but raising awareness throughout the company. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's all about awareness.
Yeah.
Awareness it's the drive that will provide the relevant processes and further investment in this area.
Yeah, I don't know if Idan or Tiennot wanted to add anything to what Matan's saying about this idea of awareness in companies and making sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to third-party web applications.
Yeah, it's actually, I will say something. It's actually one of the biggest challenges we have today in the market because it's a new market, it's a new area. Clients used to protect their own code, they are used to think about OWASP top 10 and think about website. And the new way of thinking of it's not only me, it's my third party, and it's the same premise and same level. And if I want to be secure, I'm only secured as my least secured third party in that case. And that's something we see that CISOs are now learning. That it's much better than 2 or 3 years ago, but it's a new approach. It's not enough to say I have the best team. It's not enough to say I have the best web application security in my group. What about those? If I need them, so let's protect them. Let's mitigate the risk with them. But I can't ignore and say I will let all of them, all these third party do what they want, and I will just skip.
So they're almost extending their reach over their own teams to include these third parties. Yeah, extending
they have to, and it's new. It's new. It's not something very common to do, and in our use day to day.
Okay, good. Idan, I want to stick with you.
Sorry.
Tiennot, go for it.
Next to that, I really would like to add, because if you take a look at the original security officers from the past, when you look at, they were used to look at risks from their company's perspective. However, now with legacy like GDPR and everything, they force you to take a look at the risk from your visitors, your client perspective, the person behind the end user, the protection of their privacy. Actually, that's what you need to look from that perspective as well, and not just for what is the risk of my company, but also what is the risk for the privacy data of my visitors, of my clients, of my users. Because, well, if you don't do that, the things you can see, well, how do you say it? The implications can be grave if you know what kind of fines are being out there.
Yeah, sure. Matan, so you're not in agreement with that. What's your take on that?
I don't got anything else to add on what Tiennot said. I think that totally agree with what he's saying.
Good. Okay, cool. Idan, let's go back to you. So what are the methods out there to solve the problem created by vulnerable third parties and compromised supply chains too?
So there are several methods to solve the issue. The first method is not to solve the issue. So as Matan said previously, many companies are just rather to keep making more penetration testing and making questionnaires which may be a bit more questions, and trying to enforce the solution. And I assume that is an aspect of budget and awareness. But let's assume that you do want to solve the issue specifically. There are a couple of things you can do. First of all, many companies trying to reduce the risk level. Store some of the third parties locally on their servers. It won't fully secure the problem, solve the problem, but will reduce or a bit mitigate the risk. They can try to use some kind of browser headers that's trying to limit the access of third parties. It's a bit more technical, but you have solutions like CISSP, Content Security Policy today, or SRI, Sub-Reasons Integrity, that are actually validating that the script that you're loading is actually doing what it's supposed to do, and if it's not, you can block it automatically. Those solutions are widely used with a big challenge that it's very, very hard to maintain them. So in order to organization to implement a CISSP content security policy on the website, they will need to have a team of few people working only on that for a few days. It is very complicated to maintain it on time. But we are seeing companies sign at least to start with those headers and store locally. And the last option is trying to use some kind of solution that will try to mitigate the risk. And the solution idea here is mostly get visibility on the third party's application, be install script or by remote scanner. So we actually, the first level is give our client, give the CISO the visibility of the third-party application, and then map the different risks that they are doing. So if you have a tag or have a script running on your site, first of all, the CISO will finally know which is the application, get data about the application, what the application is doing, but then we'll also know what the application is doing, and we'll be able to block it or remove it or mitigate it on action. There are several companies trying to solve this this solution like this, and that's the idea. So it's a combination of reducing the attack surface, removing unused third parties, store some third parties locally, maybe use headers to limit the access, especially in sensitive pages. So if you have a checkout page, limit everything the third party can do on the checkout page, at least reduce the gap, and then use some kind of solution like Reflected and other solution that's trying to give it the full visibility and alert you when one of those third parties is doing something it's not supposed to do. Not supposed to do it, not necessarily, and that's important, it's not necessarily a mates card attack. It's not necessarily a supply chain that will now change the world. It can be a new version, and this version is now collecting new data that creates you some kind of PII problem, and you're now in a breach on your GDPR privacy policy. Or it may be just a new version that stores using an unsecured certificate, and now your users are getting alert about bad certificates. So it's not only the mates card advanced attack, it can be varieties of issues that you can have if you're deciding to use third parties, and it's crucial to use third parties today. So mitigation of the risk, some headers and security tools to block them, and of course, monitoring solution to get the visibility of the solution. That's the methods today.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Idan. Let's talk about something that's actually happened that's out there and we all know about, and that is the SolarWinds attack. Matan, let's come to you on this. And do you see any connections with attacks like SolarWinds to this kind of attack? I mean, are they the same thing?
Well, conceptually, yes, because after all, a legitimate and trusted software and code was maliciously changed and deployed among thousands of SolarWinds customers around the globe. But if we look at the bigger picture, it's a bit different. We're talking about state-sponsored attack with highly skilled and motivated and funded threat actor that using highly advanced techniques, and not only digital, by the way, but they are talking about intelligence and other aspects which are very broad and advanced. So conceptually, yes. Specifically for this case, not so much, but yeah, we're talking about supply chain. It's a classic supply chain attack with huge implications that we will just reveal soon, I think.
I will add up if it's okay. So what Matan said, the idea of supply chain attack is the same to both the IT LAN environment and the web application environment. Yeah. So in SolarWinds, the attacker was able to read some kind of software and alter the code, and then the code was altered on all of the customers of SolarWinds, and that's exactly what we have today that we call mates card or web skimming. That's exactly the idea. So we have a tag of Facebook, a tag of LinkedIn, or any kind of open source, and if I, as an attacker, can reach to the code and change the code, I have now a direct connection to the website to change my code. SolarWinds is a user event, it's as Matan said, it's a state sponsored, but the concept is the same. As if you need now to find a solution how to secure SolarWinds in your LAN, because you now have 100 software running on your LAN on your users, for the same reason, precisely, you need to find a solution that will protect you against the 100 apps that are running on your website and on your users and data. Same concept completely, a different scenario in that case, and different environment to that attack.
I must add that finding such a threat like SolarWinds, it's highly complicated and complex, and well, I don't know if you have any off-the-shelf product or practice that other than performing reverse engineering of the code and finding malicious code. It's very challenging. It's very challenging.
Yeah. Thank you. Tiennot, did you want to add anything?
No, not at this point. Thank you.
Okay.
I fully agree with the guys.
Good. Well, I'd like to stick with you anyway for the next point, which is about data breaches. And with so many of them taking place in Europe, are CISOs really asking themselves, are you sure your client's data is safe? Perhaps you could elaborate on that point.
Well, I really hope that all CISOs and privacy officers are asking themselves that question. Well, every hour they are awake. Of course, they need to sleep. But actually, the guys I know, they actually do so. They are trying to get to wrap around that question. That's their job. However, think about how big the surface is. The surface, I mean, the area which you can hit. Surface. Sorry for my English. When I started in IT, I was a mainframe operator. We had one mainframe, and we had one computer that was reachable only from inside the network. However, if you take a look now, each and every system there is has connection to the outside, one way or another. Each and they need to worry about that, about connections into that network. Everything needs to be able to connect. And also think about development. The old development, back in the old days when I was starting my career, companies had years for a release to come out. Everything was waterfall, could be tested, everything great, was not good again, we tested again, we made fixes, and then in the end we had a product that went online. However, nowadays I know of companies, actually I think Facebook has 3,000 releases a day, things like that. You cannot keep track of that if you are not having some automated way of dashboarding or monitoring or using some smart technology to monitor that and notify you about when something is going on. So yes, I do think the CISOs are asking themselves that question. However, because of the surface and the throughput, I think it's very difficult to keep track. And again, they need automation to do so.
Okay, yeah. One of the things I took from that is that it's a game of catch up, right? We're still catching up from the rapid development of things. We've actually got a question from the floor as well at the moment, which we're going to take some questions at the end of the session anyway. I just want to throw this one open to you. Let's just have a look. One of our attendees has asked, web apps must be written using secure coding standards and rules. Any solutions in the market that claim protecting web apps is just a marketing if the app is insecure by design? If we have a web app secured by design and we add an additional layer to protect, that's good because we respect the principle of in-depth security. So the first steps are to threat model the web apps, write it using secure standards and rules, and after we add other layers. Yeah, do you want to have each of you have any thoughts about this? Thank you.
Yes, I can say something. Matan, you want to start? You want to start?
Yeah, well, we're talking about third parties. So everything that is outside of your core and in-house developed application, and well, although it's integrated into your application or with your application, but you don't have any control of it because you didn't develop it. And this is the main challenge here, that we can develop the most secure website in the world and integrate a third-party add-on that will overlay in the payment form or other forms that and actually just perform keylogging and intercept data and bypass all of your securities in all of your secure coding practices and your web application firewall and other activities that you perform. And so, yeah, this is the main challenge, and we don't have enough awareness and processes and practices around it. And like Tiennot and Idan mentioned, it's a matter of practices, processes to gain visibility over what's going on and control over which code is doing what and if it's okay or not. So yeah, definitely. I think that secure coding is highly important, but yet again, we need to also cover the third-party risks that are a bit outside of the zone of your secure application.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I will add a sentence that you are right. Security is security by layer. That's an important concept. But as I said in the beginning, most of the organizations today are using the first or second layer of checking your code. So we call it threat modeling, and then some code review and application, and then maybe penetration testing before going live to production. And what I decided is to claim here that you can finish on the penetration testing, because the penetration testing will check your own code, will check the status currently today, on the release day, on the day of the new version. But because we are in a third-party based world, and because we have so much application that running all day long and changing, you need to be able to update the risk and monitor the risk on an ongoing basis. So I fully agree about security by layers, but you need to don't forget the last layer of ongoing monitoring for changes from your code, especially on top, but of course from these open sources and third parties that are all over the place. As I told you in the beginning, that's all everyone, we are talking about dozens of applications per site. It's not one or two. It's dozens of applications. When you are now developing a code and we are all in an agile environment, developers even are using dozens of open sources alone just to make the A/B testing and the automation and the performance testing. We are discovering so many repositories that's uploaded on a daily basis. So there are too many of them. You need to have some kind of automatic solution on it.
Okay, thanks, Idan. So here's the million-dollar question. How can you make digital business secure again by monitoring your third parties and the dependencies they create?
So it's a hard question, I have to say, because if anyone has the solution, I think can be very happy now. But at least from our point of view, we like to call it the WWW approach, like the who, the what, and the where. So from our point of view, if you want to be really secured and you're a digital business that want to have full protection, you first need to know who are your third parties. Period. You need to have your inventory, you need to know who created them, you need to know what they are using, you need to understand where they are installed, you need to create your own inventory. I think both Matan and Tiennot talked about that. Visibility is the basic to understand the risk. Then you need to ask yourself the second question, which is what they are doing. What type of risk they are creating to my site? Are they accessing my camera or microphone? Are they reading my data of my users? If so, what data? My passport, credit card numbers, username, just the sales, nothing. So we have the who, you have the what, and then the next question is the where they are going with your data. Are they sending the data outside? If they're sending the password outside, you maybe have a problem. If they are collecting credit card numbers and sending it outside of Europe, you maybe have a privacy problem. And by these three questions, and by the way, that is approach, I guess, you are able to understand what are the risks that I have, because I know who are the third parties, what they are doing, where they are going, and to qualify if the risk is a problem we want to solve or not. You might say, I'm okay, I have Facebook, and Facebook is doing tracking on my user, and that's the life. I can't live without Facebook, and my marketing team is demand that I have Facebook in my site. Perfect. So I know the risk, I know the data, I know where it is going, and I'm approving the risk. And it's a general concept of approving or mitigating the risk itself. But then, if you have small third parties that are not really familiar about it, and which now decided to collect my credit card numbers, or decided to take my PI data and sending it to a different country all around the globe, wait, maybe I have an issue here. Maybe I have an issue from the privacy perspective, maybe I have an issue from the security perspective, and I want to solve. But in order to do this risk management, you first need to answer those three questions: who, what, when.
That's fascinating. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to throw the floor for questions if there are any. At the moment, we don't have any, so feel free to send in your questions if you have any you want to ask. In the meantime, what I'd like to do is perhaps ask you about what, first of all, I'd like personally to know how you see the management of third-party apps in the future, in that we are now all becoming more used to using them, and they're ubiquitous in our daily life, and now our third-party apps are also using other third-party apps. And it's a process. And so, are we in danger of kind of losing sight of the security aspect because we're so comfortable with using them? they're such a formal part of our life now. And do we kind of forget the security aspect? And what can we do to kind of mitigate that? People are tending to redress the balance between protecting our data and comfort of use for applications. So how do we make sure that everybody thinks about security in those terms?
Raising the awareness, first of all. We're talking about a trend that I think started probably 4 years ago, and talking about British Airways, talking about other well-known, high-profile examples. MageCart is one of the biggest threat actors and active threat actors, and they are well, they are doing great business. Business, I mean business for their own benefit. But I do think that overall there must be awareness for such threats. It costs money. It costs well, in terms of reputation, and also regulatory implications over organizations like British Airways and other organizations that got breached via these kind of threats. I don't think that it will be overlooked for sorry, for a lot of time. And I do think that overall the big web application security actors, defense-wise, will also integrate this kind of capabilities into their own mechanisms. This is not something that can be overlooked. This is something that should be addressed and must be addressed because it actually bypasses most of your conservative defense approach and perception. That's it, I think. Idan, do you have anything else to
Thank you, Matan. Tiennot, do you have anything, any thoughts on the subject?
Actually, I fully agree with Matan, awareness. But also, well, I don't really call it acceptance, but the more what you see now in the world, that things are getting more open. It's getting more communicated when something is going on. Here in the Netherlands, we had a major hack about a website that lost all their clients' data, and people learn about it, and other organizations learn about it. And of course, if it is your organization which is hacked and data is breached, it's not okay. But I do think it is okay that organizations start learning from each other and see what's going on, and combine that with solutions like Reflectis or like those other kind of solutions. I think we are getting to slowly to a higher level of awareness and understanding of what we can do. But again, it's very difficult material.
Definitely.
Thanks, Tiennot. And Idan, did you want to have any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that another thing we will see in the next few years is the trying to solve a bit of the problem before going live. So instead of just waiting for production, to scan your pre-production, to try and intelligence to connect third-party apps with your CI/CD process, to validate with your third parties, to make sure they are installed in the right places, to make sure they are not doing anything already on testing, so you don't even launch the problematic code. We are seeing companies today trying to do it already, trying to say, wait, I don't want to wait until I get ready for 5 days. Let's test me before. And so I think as we go forward, and third party will be insert to part of the SDLC, will be part of the security development lifecycle. They will be tried to be solved even before going live. So the same concept that we are used to see with our own code will be enforced on them, depending on the size of the company, depending on the third party, but not to just say, oh, it's a script, let's edit and hope for the best. No, it will be part of the SDLC process. It will just take time and a bit more awareness, as Tiennot said.
Okay, thank you very much. At the moment, we don't have any Q&As for you for the panel. Let me just remind you, though, all the attendees, that you can obviously visit Reflective in their event booth. So they have, you can talk about the solutions, you can video chat with them, you can have a one-to-one discussion, and the booth will be open throughout the whole of the tracks. So it just remains to me to thank the three of you for contributing today to a fascinating discussion. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and let's hope we can continue to protect our web applications and keep cyber safe in the future. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Love to be here.
Thank you.
Love to be here.
Thank you very much.